Welcome back to Breakfast Central. We're talking about accountable leadership, and this morning we're joined by the lead pastor of the Elevation Church, Pastor Godman Akinlabi. Good morning once again, and thank you very much for joining us. And my first question would be, what exactly would accountable leadership mean? Looking at the context of our country, Nigeria, would you say that what we have currently is accountable leadership? If not, would you paint a picture for us of what accountable leadership should look like?
All right, thank you very much. I'll say very clearly that accountable leadership is transparent leadership, leadership that is altruistic, leadership that is focused not on self, but on the people and the goals, the standards. How do we fulfill our aspiration? Seeing the nation or a state or a city as a project and not, not just that we're having fun, but we're on the project. We want to move from A to B. We want to make progress. And what will take us from A to B is that we lead transparently. We know where we're going. Everybody's carried along. So accountable leadership is transparent leadership, is inclusive leadership that can move a nation from point A to B. Now, let me quickly lay out something on it. Nations fail when the nation becomes an extractive, or build extractive institutions rather than inclusive and transparent institutions. And everything has a ripple effect on whether the nation is prosperous or poverty, becomes the order of the day. The things we're having, for instance, in our own climate around poverty, around insecurity and all those kind of things, border on the institutions of governance that are supposed to be accountable and transparent, but rather than being accountable, transparent, inclusive, they are more extractive. Everybody's looking for what to get. So you realize that resources that are supposed to go in certain directions don't go there, and we have gaps. And those gaps are the things that manifest, themselves, and we then see the symptoms of the gaps in insecurity, in backwardness, poverty, economic downturn, and what have you.
All right. Over time, and maybe recently we've maybe also gotten to see it become worse. And that is, the divisions, across Nigeria. There's now more tribalism. There's more, even downright bigotry amongst, people. There are people fighting, among religious lines and among tribal lines. And it's never, I don't think it's ever been this bad. So can you share with us, what leadership would be? And what type of leadership would, be able to unite Nigerians in 2024? Amongst, of course, the different ethnic lines and the different religious lines in the country today. What kind of leadership do you think that we need? Also bear in mind that we currently have a presidency running with a Muslim ticket. So these are things that, might be there, but there are subtle ways that, also might create division. But what leadership would be able to unite Nigerians today?
Yeah, I think the kind of leadership that will be able to unite Nigerians will be a leadership stemming from a political class that will refuse to weaponize poverty, tribalism, and religion. The moment the political class over-leverage religion, and all the religious divide that we have, the tribal divide that we have, and the level of poverty of the people, we will continue to have the kind of things that we have. Now, I need you to understand something. Politicians always focus on winning elections. We are in the first year of this administration. Last week, 2 weeks ago, people are already posting on social media, on Twitter, who will be the next governor of Lagos State. And, it is appalling when you see things like that, because governance must be separated from politics. The moment we mix everything up, we use negative instruments with which we get into office to also want to govern the people. So when you hear the political class say something like, oh, that tribe did not vote for us, or that religion did not support us, or so obviously they're not going to get a dividend of democracy. But you expect the people in that religion or in that tribe to pay their taxes. If you don't pay their taxes, they are going against the law, and they're going to hold them accountable. But you don't want to be held accountable to be the government of everybody, whether tribal or religious sentiment notwithstanding. That is the crux of the matter. One, the political class must not divide us by over leveraging, religion and tribe or ethnicity when it comes to elections. What we want is credible, capable and accountable leadership. Anyone that has something to offer, let them come on their merits. Yeah, not based on religion or which part of the country you came from. If we continue to operate on that, we will not see the kind of progress that we need as a people so that we can make bigger progress and move faster as a nation. So we need to separate governance from politics, and we need to stop over leveraging the divide. We build big bridges rather than breaking them down during the election. When we do it in election cycles, it reverberates across the 4 years of the tenure. The tribal sentiment of this last election is still there up till now. No day, every day you get on social media, you still see this tribal sentiment. Politicians talk, they use it to win election and they have moved on, but it's still there. It has created a crack that we all have to deal with.
A number of the things that you said, many would agree with, but those, that might be, those who are advocating for zoning would radically push back against some of these things. And what we've seen is that people only advocate for zoning when it favors them, but when it doesn't favor them, then they kick against zoning. So now let's talk about religion and politics. And it's important that we have this conversation because for the longest time, it was said that religion should be separated completely from politics and governance. But we're starting to see over the years more and more that these two different areas are starting to intermingle very, very frequently. So what is the role, what would you say is the role of religious leaders in ensuring that they hold political leaders accountable? Or would you say that the church and the mosque and all religious leaders should be completely, separated from politics and governance? Is that even possible?
Thank you very much. The truth is that it's absolutely impossible to separate religion from politics. But we need to know the role that each plays. And then there should be a constructive collaboration that can lead to progress. Let me explain what I mean. Religion is what people believe and how they believe. And what you believe affects your action. It affects how you live. Now, we cannot legislate religion. It's freedom of expression, freedom to believe what you want to believe. And as long as you're a citizen of the country, your right as a citizen must be preserved, notwithstanding your religion. So religion is our way of life. It's part of us. And everyone that will get into political office will be in one religion or the other. At worst, the person will be an atheist who probably does, and that's also a religion in itself because about what you believe. So the leaders come from amongst the people, and the people collectively have what they believe. So how do we want to extricate our belief system from how we elect our leaders? It's just intertwined. There's nothing we can do about that. Now, the most important thing is how we are inclusive in our approach. The role of religion or religious leaders is to be the ground and the pillar of truth. Yeah, who can hold political office holders accountable, notwithstanding the religious divide. So, for instance, as a pastor, I'm supposed to be able to be objective and constructively speak into what is happening in government and how the nation is being governed, notwithstanding whether it's a Muslim or a Christian or an African traditional religion worshiper or an atheist that is the president of the nation or my state governor. That's what is expected. The religious leaders or religion, whether church or mosque, we are supposed to hold certain tenets that leads to progress. And when we refuse to be biased and focus on those tenets and principles and hold leaders accountable, they know that the civil society is there. The citizens are there. The religious leaders are there. Everybody's looking at them. We are supposed to be, function more like, not like opposition, but like constructive, how do I put it now? Like people who are watching and who are stakeholders and who wants to move the country forward. And then let opposition also do their part, but we cannot be docile at the same time.
There's every now and then, some level of backlash that you also get from citizens who say that you're not doing enough. Of course, during the elections, even prior to the elections, even aside the elections, there's many times when we've seen pastors make statements on Sunday, that seems, like they're talking with both sides of their mouth. So do you accept the criticism? You may not speak for every other pastor in Nigeria, every other church leader, but do you understand and do you accept the criticism? Would you say that Nigerian church leaders have, to some extent, failed the people that want them to speak on their behalf? And it's not speaking on their behalf by advising them on who to vote or who not to vote, but at least be vocal when people are telling, are crying out. So do you accept that level of criticism and say that, we should do better as church leaders? Myself and my fellow church leaders in, different regards must do better. Would you say that?
I clearly accept that criticism, and I will say it's a yes for me, and this is the reason why I say so. Religious leaders themselves, or we religious leaders, corporate leaders, all leaders must be willing to be held accountable, including pastors and imams. And when we seem to be erring on the side of caution, the citizens should hold us accountable. So I accept the criticism. Sometimes, like you said, some pastors speak from both sides of the mouth, sending wrong signals, sometimes becoming extremely biased in our disposition. And I believe that we must exemplify some good level of balance, but we must not, be docile or play the ostrich. It's not going to be always about prayer. Prayer is extremely important. We believe in divine intervention, and we get those divine interventions on a daily basis, and that is why this country is still not in flames. But at the same time, we must play our part in nation building, which is to speak the truth to power consistently. When we have the heirs of people in governance, let me say something. Anybody that rises to leadership, whether Muslim or Christian or whatever religion, they hail from a particular church or mosque or religious house. So ideally, the places where they come from, there are values that they must have been taught there. Is when those values break down and they themselves have cut their ties with their religious leaders that they, we cannot get the kind of result that we need. If not, we should be able to get the result that we need. Religion played a great role at averting war in West Africa. You know what I'm talking about, the issue with the last coup, I think in Nigeria and all that, and how religious leaders stepped up and went to negotiate, and everything, was resolved to a large extent. That's why we're not carrying arms against our brothers in that part of Africa right now.
You've spoken about morals now, and I know that there's many people who would still argue that the Nigerian church of today, has a lot, that it should, hide its face from. But it doesn't. There's too many things you see going on in churches where people are coming to shower money on the pastor. It looks embarrassing at some point. And these are things that, make people lose faith, lose trust in what the Nigerian Christianity is all about. And it's not, an indictment on you in particular, but I feel like there's a lot more that needs to be done somehow, some way, to, of course, to change the narrative of the Nigerian church. I would like Olive to take the next question, but I just wanted to, quickly throw that in before we let you go. I wish I had more time to speak on it. That is
important, and you hit on something that is very important there. What has happened generally in the church, and it's not just Nigeria, it's global, is that the fact that people are called to ministry, anyone can start a church, and in most part of the world, there's no regulation as it were. But now, what we're seeing is an attempt to self-regulate. So we have umbrella bodies like CAN, like Pentecostal Fellowship of Nigeria. I say kudos to the Pentecostal Fellowship of Nigeria, which I belong to. Well, there's a bit of self-regulation that's going on. We gather ourselves together to speak to ourselves. Not everybody will listen, but at least we're speaking. For me, as an individual, I have a Pastors and Leaders Conference, which we call Exponential, which happens, every February. Pastors come together, we bring global voices in Christianity to speak to pastors and tell them about global best practices. You understand? And the more we have more voices speaking to how things should be done, what is accountability, succession planning, how do you run accountable leadership, decorum, and how do you lead people and make them nation builders and not just passive people who want miracles only for themselves and they don't mind how the nation turns out. When we're able to speak to such topics, then we're going to see a lot more. I'm just saying that we are committed to seeing these processes turned around. They are not as good as they should be. I agree with you perfectly.
Pastor Godman, because I can't personally say that I know that you have been very vocal about speaking on issues like this in leadership, you, Pastor Sam Adeyemi, and a number of other pastors. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. But what can we do differently to ensure that we can strengthen systems of accountability within the church, especially as regards conversation of sexual exploitation and sexual abuse? And we've heard of these talks, from the Vatican down to, the smallest unit of the churches. Very recently, of course, the Synagogue Church of All Nations has come under fire by the reports done by the BBC talking about allegations, several people sharing their stories about being abused. Now, whilst this is still being investigated, we cannot deny that it happens. So how can we strengthen the accountability within the church to ensure that we don't see a repeat of such incidences? I can't have you speak about the mosque and all that. I'm asking you about the church, of course, because you're a pastor, and you can give us an insight into how we can ensure that this does not happen again.
Thank you very much. It's important for us to understand that absolute power corrupts absolutely, all right? So whether in church or in any other religion or even in corporate Nigeria, absolute power will corrupt absolutely. The moment somebody holds the reign of power and authority without any check and balances, where some power has become absolute, it's intoxicating, and the human nature and the weakness of the human nature becomes aggravated, and it works without boundary. The culture that we met on ground in our part of the world is a culture of impunity. And the way we defer to our traditional rulers. In my language, I'm a Yoruba man. The traditional ruler is called Kabiyesi, which means unquestionable. But we know that that is not compatible with where we are now as a people. We have moved away from the age where leaders are unquestionable to the age where leaders must be held accountable, notwithstanding where they function, whether traditional ruler or religious leader or corporate Nigerian leader or government. So it is this, what we're seeing in the church or even in corporate Nigeria about sexual exploitation, sexual harassment, and all is symptomatic of lack of accountability. Anyone who goes to a church where somebody is sexually harassed, also to the point of rape, and they choose to keep quiet, are already aiding and abetting in this situation. And I mean that very seriously. It's very difficult for a pastor to continue to perpetuate evil if he will not have collaborators and citizens that are supposed to speak out. Secondly, when such issues come to the fore, how does the rule of law work in that situation? In the question of synagogue, whatever people are saying is right or wrong, it's left for people to believe what they want to believe. But some things cannot, be, how do I put it? Some things are just very as they are. Let me give you an example of what I'm saying. There was a building collapse there. It was part of the documentary. I watched the BBC documentary. Up till today, we cannot say that the report of the coroner and whatever judgment has been carried out. That's part of what we're talking about. This thing is not just about religious leaders misbehaving. There's a system that empowers misbehavior that we all need to take responsibility for. Nobody is above the law. I say it again, nobody is above the law. If we want to make progress, nobody should be above the law. Whether you're a bishop, you're a pastor, you're a pope, you are MD CEO, or president, or senate president, or chief judge, supreme court, whatever, nobody should be above the law. If we make the law work, everyone will sit tight, including pastors.
You've actually hit
That's
the nail
my,
on the head,
yeah.
and it's very important that we remember that. And thank you very much for speaking very truthfully. And we hope to see a lot more on the part of the religious leaders, and ensuring that we push for accountability and leadership within the church, outside the church, and in the political space. But thank you so much, Pastor Godman Akinlabi, for joining us this morning and for speaking to us on all that you've spoken about so far.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure. Thank you.